Welcome back to another episode of Psychocinematic. Today, I'll once again be joined by director Luca Pizzoleo. He will be talking to me about two of his recent short films. One of them hasn't released yet. That one is called The Tragic Death of a Frenchman. And then the other one is called Flashback. It was for the 48-hour film festival. So you got Flashback, your film for the 48-hour film festival that's out right now, and then Tragic Death of a Frenchman. When is that coming out?
Well, Frenchman, right now, we're still kind of holding off since we're waiting to hear back from some festivals, which should be, early next year. So we're hoping to have a release sometime quarter 1. So maybe around March is what we're looking at. But,
Nice.
Obviously we don't have a date confirmed yet, but we'd really love to get that out as soon as possible.
Is it normal for these film festivals to take forever to get back to you on those things? Or like, do they tell you when you could expect to hear?
Yeah. So the thing is with film festivals is the timeline typically is around a year because you finish a film, you get their deadlines. Some film festivals are, there's a deadline in August or their final deadline is in October. And then their festival will premiere sometime next year, like May or June. So there's a pretty long, around 6 to 8 month process that you're just sitting and kind of waiting for them, to get back to you. So typically a short film for it to fully be released is about a year. So it is very normal, which it sucks because you want people to watch your stuff, but you kind of have to do it. You got to play the game.
I would assume that you're probably past this point, but being an artist and maybe you are a perfectionist, when you finally get to release the film to people, are you now like, God, I would have done this different. Like, I no longer like this film as much anymore. I wish I could have just showed everyone when I was on fire about it.
Yeah.
Do you get like that?
For me with Frenchman, I kind of wish I could have released it, earlier on because as time goes on and as you start to work on more things, you look back at your past work. And Frenchman for me has been a year completed, but no one has seen it. And so from my perspective, I feel like I've grown so much in that year, but when I release it, it'll be fresh for everyone. So it is totally that where I can watch Frenchman back. And I do believe it is my favorite film. Like, every time I watch it, I do enjoy it. It was the most fun I ever had on a film set. I'm sure you could tell when you watch the movie that we had fun making it. We had a good time, and I'll always kind of remember that. So I love Frenchman, but there's definitely some things, I'd go back and I'd do a little differently if I had the chance to do it again, but for sure.
While we're on the topic of Frenchman, we can dive right into that one. So the movie completely caught me off guard because I've seen, you promote it and, like just cover some like behind the scenes stuff on TikTok. So for one, I thought it was going to be way more about the drugs and it was not.
Yeah.
Gotta say, like, it was a pretty brilliant dark comedy. I loved it. Like, I watched it alone in my office, with headphones on, and I actually laughed out loud once, and I almost never laugh out loud if I'm by myself. So that I feel like is an accomplishment in itself. Don't want to give too much away. And if it's too much, you can let me know. When they're putting the body in the car.
Yeah. No, first of all, thank you. It was, like I said before, it was the most fun I've ever had making a movie. And I wrote it with Ryan and Ryan Emilio Molina, who he was in the Valley of the Moon. He played Mark Green, and he's also in Frenchman as Ned. Ryan and I feel like we have a very similar sense of humor, and so we're kind of just going back and forth on things and coming up with new ideas. And I'm like, oh yeah, we should break his legs and make it really gruesome and just like you sit there and you're like, oh my god. And anytime we've had a screening or at a film festival, the audience has this sort of like visceral reaction to it. And so I've loved that. And I think it's super fun, but I appreciate you saying that. And I'm happy I got a laugh out of you. For me, it's hard for me to laugh at movies. And I think this is my first comedy that I've truly tackled where it is solely based to try and be funny, if that makes sense. And so it's like you never know if what you find funny, the audience is going to find funny. My sense of humor with my friends might not exactly translate to a film, but it seems like it has so far. So I appreciate that.
It's funny on its own, that whole scene, but it's even funnier now with all those TikToks that came out of like the chiropractors with their patients. And, dude, it was the exact same energy. It was hilarious.
What's so funny about that is me and Roz who's also one of the other actors in Frenchman. That's been our long time running joke, is a chiropractor, and we would die at those videos where it's just like some
Mhm.
old lady and they just go "Whoosh," and they like crack her neck. She's like, oh, and you're just like, there's no way this is good for you. There's no way.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
very funny you mentioned that because it's a similar thing how we came up with that scene.
Another part I really loved in there was when they're trying to figure out what to do with this body, and they are in that movie store and they're asking for movie recommendations, which, I mean, if you're just a movie fan, that's just such a fun way to figure out how to dispose of a body.
Right.
And I was telling you this like via email or DM, where after the Weekend at Bernie's came up, I was like, come on, Snatch, please.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just thinking of the pig
Right.
farmers.
When we wrote the character of Quinn, we really wanted to make someone who's like this film buff, and they've seen every movie and he knows everything, and he can come up with, if you want to figure out how to do this or that, he can come up with something that can relate in a way. And so when we were kind of going through our own film knowledge and stuff, obviously Weekend at Bernie's is the closest comp to Frenchman. And then, we were thinking Ryan came up with the idea of Snatch, and then Fargo was kind of my idea, and all those were so fun. I kind of wish we had time to do a little pig farm segment where we could, have like little chunks of meat going
Yeah.
into a little pig pen. But the Fargo one was really fun. We ended up driving out to Big Bear for that. And so we did a
Mm,
whole like day's trip. We went there for like 3 days. We drove out there. It was snowing. I bought a wood chipper from Home Depot, which is crazy
damn.
expensive. If you want to rent a wood chipper, you need like a trailer. And so the wood chipper I found was so fucking expensive. I returned it, so I got my money back for it. But still,
Okay.
it's just like, you
Thanks, Home Depot.
yeah, I'm like, holy shit, man, what am I gonna do with a wood chipper if I can't return it? But we drove it out to Big Bear, we built it, we just like, filmed the quick little scene, and then we are like, all right, we're done. And that was kind of it. But it was so fun, man. It was so fun.
So, with that movie store, that location, is that an actual movie store or is that like a pawn shop? Like, could you actually find a movie store these days?
Yeah, every time I do a movie, I always feel like something's going to be easier when I write it. And so when I did Valley, I was like, it's not going to be that hard to find a 70s accurate home. It is. And then I'm like, how hard is it going to be to find a Blockbuster? And newsflash, they're all closed. So there's no Blockbusters, no video stores, but there is one video store, and it's the only video store that's open in Los Angeles. And it's called Cinephile, and it's on Santa Monica, next to Santa Monica and Sawtell. It's the only video store in California, or at least from my knowledge, at least Los Angeles, and it's looks amazing. It's very tailored to a sort of like film nerd and film, cinephile person. They have every Criterion collection you could imagine. They have really cool merch too. If you like, cool director merch, it's a very cool place. But I ended up reaching out to them and seeing if they were able to allow me to film there. And they're super nice there. Sebastian and JP are great over there. But it was a really cool location, really rare find. But I hope they stay open and people go check them out.
You definitely get that feeling of nostalgia just from it. And so I was going to be either impressed that you found a movie store or impressed that you made a pawn shop or something like that look like a movie store.
Right. We ended up going in after they're closed, and we were there. I think it was a whole nighttime shoot, so we were there kind of all night. But it was just so fun, and outside of just the video store scene, with all the other scenes in general, we typically shot everything after hours, because I think that's kind of the best time you can carry a dummy with a body and have blood everywhere. You got to be really careful.
Right.
I'll tell you a funny story. We, in the car scene where they were breaking the leg, uh I had Ryan and Roz who were holding this dummy, very realistic looking dummy of Olivier. We had him dressed up like Olivier in the rug, and me and Jeremy, my DP, we were kind of like all the way at the other end of this alleyway on like a telephoto lens, so you couldn't see us. And Roz and Ryan, I had them on the phone. I was like, yeah, guys, let's reset, because we're not supposed to be here. We're kind of guerrilla filmmaking in this alleyway we're not supposed to be in. It's 4 o'clock in the morning. And I'm like, okay, guys, go back and reset. And they walk to the edge of the alleyway, and I see this car drive by. And as the car drives by, I see the red lights go on, like they're backing up. Car backs up, and they roll down the window. They go, oh my God, it's this woman. She goes, is that a dead body? She screams at Roz and Ryan, And I'm like, oh shit. I run over there. I'm like, no, 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 it's not a body, because she was about to call the cops. First of all, the gall on someone to yell at like some
Seriously.
supposed killers with a body.
Yeah,
And
I know.
I was like, no, no, we're just making a movie. And she's like, okay, cool. And I was like, dude, you're crazy.
Yeah, I mean, if someone would have written that for a movie, you'd be like, that's not believable. No one would do that. Like, that's crazy that she stopped.
It didn't make sense to me because I'm like a paranoid person. And so I'm like, I'm not gonna, if I
Yeah.
see someone that I think has a dead body, the last thing I'm gonna do is confront them,
Yeah,
Yeah.
like maybe just keep driving and call the cops and make a
Exactly.
note of where it was,
Right,
like
right.
something like that. And then even the beach scene,
Mhm.
and you guys are into the
Yeah.
water. I don't know if that's too much of a spoiler. I can cut it out if so.
Just a little bit, but we could allude to it for sure.
How did you make sure what you threw into the water came back?
Oh, that's hilarious. Okay, so check this out, right? We we filled the with packing peanuts in like trash bags, and we'd like taped them up so like they wouldn't get out. We went to the ocean, we went to the beach, and when we put this thing in the water, I feel like for me, I was like, okay, the wave is going to bring it back. And, it did. We ended up putting it in a couple times. The wave brought it back. And I was like, okay, great. Because I had a couple ideas of attaching a rope to it, but I didn't want to be able to see the rope because it just didn't, and I'm not great with CGI or visual effects. So it would have been kind of difficult for me to mask out. And so we were like, you know what? Let's just do it. Hopefully the wave will bring it back. The wave brought it back every time, except for the last time. And the last time we threw it in, which is the one we used in the movie, it ended up floating out real far. And me and Roz, obviously, everyone kind of felt like, oh my God, dude, like this is terrible because there's like packing peanuts in there. This is like awful for the environment. And we were like, I was like, let's see if we can get it back. And a wave ended up coming. And I went almost like, and I'm terrified of the ocean, by the way. My friends are like, go in
Mhm.
and get it. And I'm like, dude, please. Like, I'm freaking out. It's like freezing. It's the middle of the night. And I go in the water and the came back and I ended up grabbing it. And thankfully, like everything, we got it back. But I got bruised up and cut up a couple times. So it was really
Mhm.
lucky that we didn't actually lose it. But there was no plan there was no solid plan in place to get it back. But
Yeah.
thankfully it worked out.
Yeah, I was wondering if maybe you guys had been using like a rope or fishing line, or maybe you had like an anchor that kept it down. But
Yeah.
I was like, man, it's nighttime. I would hate to get in that water because, yeah, I'm terrified of the ocean too.
Yeah.
And yeah, those waves, you just never know.
Yeah.
And I think we've all seen Jaws and Night Swim. So it's like, fuck that.
No, dude, fuck that. I hate the water. It's my biggest fear. My biggest fear is the water. I don't even like deep pools.
I know what my most irrational fear
Mhm.
is. And it's if I take a cold shower, I feel like I am out in the water and a shark is rushing me. And
Really?
I like start not
Uh-huh.
hyperventilating from the temperature.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
the idea that a shark is
yeah,
rushing me. And I'm in the shower and I know this, but
yeah.
it's like the most irrational thing. So yeah, I get where you're coming
No,
from.
dude, I'm the same way. I can't with aquatic animals. That's my biggest fear for sure. So in any water
Yeah.
that's below, I think knee deep, I'm a little worried in.
So how long did this film take you guys to shoot?
From beginning to end, we were writing Frenchman while we were editing Valley. And so by the time Valley had wrapped and we were done editing it and it was off to the festivals, we pretty much immediately started shooting. And so I think we started shooting sometime in February last year. And it took us up to about, I think, November of last year. So because we wanted to also the Fargo scene was one of the final things we filmed, and we wanted to wait for winter to do that because we wanted it to be snowy and kind of feel that Fargo vibe. And so when we wrapped, the majority of the production was probably earlier to like June or July. So I think it took about four-ish months to shoot. The thing was is the film, the way that we typically work on a lot of these short films is we spread them out, because for budgetary reasons. If we had a huge
Mhm.
budget, we would do things, just back to back to back. But if you're spending a couple thousand on this like major shoot, then for me, it's like I kind of got to take a break and wait, recuperate some money, and then go back into it. But generally, I think we only had about a 10-day shoot. The craziest shoot that I think was the most that had the most in it was the apartment scene, and so that is the beginning of the film, everything up until them leaving the apartment and breaking his legs. That was about a 3-day shoot, and we went into my buddy's apartment. He moved out. He went to Spain, and he has this apartment, really cool apartment in like Beverly Hills. It was like from the 90s, and he's like, "Yeah, you can shoot in here. Like, I don't care." We ended up like blacking out all the windows. We shot during the daytime, and yeah, we smoked that apartment out. Really, really horribly. I mean, we weren't smoking weed, but we were smoking parsley. And so it smells awful. And when everyone's just
Mm.
ripping like parsley bongs and like smoking parsley joints and no one's leaving the space for like 12 hours and everything is closed, it was really disgusting.
While we're on this topic of shooting and budgetary restrictions, how much do you have to restrict yourself while you're writing to fit the budget?
Generally, when Ryan and I work on a project, or anyone other than that, right now I'm working on another project, OCD. And typically when we write a film, a thing that I used to do when I was younger is when I would write it, I would go, that's a little too difficult. I don't think I'm going to be able to do that. Budgetary wise, this is going to be too expensive. And it wasn't until a few years ago that I got a piece of advice from a friend of mine who's in the industry, and he's like, fuck that. He's like, write the movie you want to write the vision you have. And then when you're ready to shoot it, or when you're kind of getting to that stage after you already have the script, then you can figure it out. And maybe you can make compromises then, but don't compromise the story while you're writing it. Because if you're writing a script and you're like, oh, that's too expensive, I'm going to change it, I'm going to move this and that, then you're not necessarily thinking about the story first. You're thinking of exterior things that are going to affect the film down the line that have nothing to do with the story at hand. So when Ryan and I wrote the film, we wrote it as we wanted to. We did the Fargo, and we did the video store, even though in my mind I was like, there's no way, we're going to find a video store. We wrote it, and then you figure it out. And if we have to compromise, we can make adjustments. And there's many times in all of our films that we're like, okay, this is a little too expensive the way we wrote it, but we can still keep the same, have the same sentiment of the scene, just by maybe changing a few things. So typically when I write a script, I don't restrict myself with, like future thoughts of budgetary restrictions or anything like that.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And that kind of goes into my next question, where it's like, are you sitting on a story that you're wanting to tell for when you can afford to tell it the way you want to tell it?
Yes and no. So right now I'm telling the story that I want to tell, which is this film that I'm working on called OCD. And that's a film I've been working on with a writer named Connor Patrick Walsh, who's insanely talented and a great guy. And we've been developing it as a short film, but also as a feature. And so that, is my goal. Is I would love to make OCD as a feature, but as a short film, I haven't really had any restrictions or have had to hold myself back. We did a GoFundMe campaign. We were able to raise the money for the film. And so we were able to make the movie that we're currently making. And but if I'm talking future, like a movie I really want to do when I have a big budget, I would love to do Valley as a feature film. That's kind of my long, arching goal. It's one of those things like Damien Chazelle said he did Whiplash so he could do La La Land. It's sort of that idea with me, where if I can do a couple movies and I can make my way up, eventually I want to do my 70s, crime movie. That would be my goal, like
Gotcha.
down the line.
Do you have a full-length feature written out for it currently?
For Valley, no, but I do have kind of like the beginning, middle, and end in my head. The thing is for me, I'm much more a director than I am a writer. And it's not to say that I'm not a writer. Obviously, I've written quite a few things, but it comes down to my own like personal enjoyment. And I don't love writing all that much, but I love being involved in the story. And so my preferred relationship is kind of what I'm working on now with OCD, where Connor is writing the film, but him and I are sitting down and we're like, oh, this can happen here and this can happen there. And we have these ideas and are coming together, but I'm not physically, writing the script because I hate it.
Yeah, yeah. No, I get that. It's nice to be creative with like coming up with the story, but yeah, when it comes to putting words on paper, that part sucks.
It can be daunting. And I think the thing is just kind of forcing yourself to do it. And I've been writing more recently and I have enjoyed it the more I've done it. But I think for me, it's about like the physical writing and like sitting down and like formatting. I just like coming up with ideas and putting this here. Like I don't want to format everything. I think I just want to make and do. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. What kinds of things are you doing on set that is kind of altering the piece, like with your direction? I guess it might be hard to specify because you're also, having a hand in the writing, but like maybe for OCD, since you're kind of helping coming up with the story, but then, you're not physically writing it. So like how much does it change from the paper to when you're shooting it because of your direction?
So that's a great question. When specifically with OCD, because that's what I'll kind of relate it to. I do kind of have, when Connor and I are working on the film and we're coming up with our 3-act structure and all the beats in between, when he gets a draft, we work on that draft together. And there's definitely things where I'm like, I think that this sounds a little like off, or maybe we could make it sound more like this or that or whatnot. And if there's ever kind of anything where I feel like it doesn't flow that well, or maybe something doesn't work, not to necessarily say it's a bad idea, but it's different when you actually get actors speaking things and doing things. And so with Connor particularly, I'll kind of, him and I will talk about it and I'll be like, I think we can tweak this. And also the thing is too, when you're working with a writer who does respect your vision as a director, they understand that when you're on set, things do change. And I love to improv. It's one of my favorite things. I mean, dude, half of Frenchman is improv. I mean, literally half of that movie, Olivier telling all his little crazy kooky stories, about the rainforest, all that is improv. So it's like, we kind of like build up, a map of where he can start, and then him and I will work on it together. And with OCD, it's kind of been no different. And I love Connor as a writer, and I love the words he puts to paper. So there hasn't been a ton that I've changed, but there's definitely things where I'm like, hey, let's like, play around with this. Let's try going this route and that route. And we just did a shoot with Pete Gardner, who was one of the lead actors in Crazy Ex-Girlfriends. It was a TV show. And he, we just improv'd like this whole scene. He's supposed to be this crazy guy on the news and he's like screaming, and it's hilarious. And that to me is the most fun, is when you can just sit down with an actor. I can give them an idea, they can give me one, and we can kind of go back and forth and figure the scene out together. And the script is kind of like your, blueprint. And that's what you're looking at, but then you can build upon that.
So yeah, it's cool that you allow for that kind of creative freedom for both yourself and the actor. I feel like that can definitely result in some really magic moments. And it's funny because I wanted to watch the Tragic Death of a Frenchman a second time before this, because I was like, all right, now I watched it, like now let's really try and like dive into it. I ended up not. I was running out of time, but I was like, I feel like I really got to go back and listen to Olivier's like all this stuff. And so I'm so glad that I didn't like analyze like what do these stories mean.
Yeah. Well, the thing that's funny is a lot of the stories are kind of they're kind of based on real things Olivier has previously talked about. Not, in its full truth or like exactly how it is the film, but Olivier Raquelme is truly he's such a phenomenal actor. He's an incredible human being. And he's one of the most fun people I've ever worked with outside of my friends, Roz and Ryan and Landon. But Olivier I've known him for I think like 5-ish years now. And when you're with Olivier, he starts to just say the most unironically funny things you could ever think of. And he's worked with us before on our previous projects as like a second AD. And I remember we were on Valley and we were shooting it, and we were all kind of breaking for lunch, and Olivier's sitting there and we're all asking each other, what'd you do for the weekend? I went out, I saw a movie, this and that. And Olivier's like, well, I went to the Blood Rave. And we're like, what? And we're like, well, everyone stops like talking what they're talking about. They go, what's a blood rave? And he's like, oh, it's like, in the movie Blade where the sprinklers rain blood and everyone's dancing and all that. And I was like, you went to that? Like, what do you mean you went to that? He goes, oh yeah, it's downtown LA, like, in a basement. And so he has these like wild, just like amazing stories. And he's like a huge like animal rights activist, and he's like he travels and he does all these like amazing charitable things. He's such an amazing person. And it's like when you talk to him, he just comes up with like he has all these random stories that he just starts talking about. And so when we wrote Frenchman, it was sort of based on all those stories that Olivier had like kind of told us. And we're like, oh my God, this is totally something, Olivier would talk about. And we even like borrowed certain things that he told us before. And so it is pretty funny, but I don't think we put too much thought in terms of like, okay, maybe this has like a bigger significance here. It was sort of like we wanted Olivier to just seem like this kind of, dude who like travels and does all this crazy shit, and he's like the most interesting man in the world. But yeah.
Lately, I've been thinking about the scores in movies a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
It's only because I was watching a film recently where I felt like there was supposed to be music and then there wasn't. And so, it's like one of those glass breaking moments where you're like, oh, this feels off.
Right.
So I wanted to ask you, since you edited Frenchman, and I think you edit most of your films,
Yeah.
do you have like a certain formula in your head when you're like, all right, there needs to be music here? Or is it just something that you kind of play with while you're editing?
I think it's a great question because for me, I know some filmmakers who might not think too deep. And then I know some who are like, okay, well, this song, the lyrics need to relate, or this needs to have this. And for me, I think I look at a movie, especially when I'm editing it or watching a movie, as a piece of music. Everything that I've done when it comes to making a film or writing a film has all been based off of a song. So Valley, for instance, was based off of I think a 60s song called Breakaway by Irma Thomas. And Frenchman was based on a Brigitte Bardot song named Moi Juju. And it's kind of this thing where I've always been this way ever since I was a kid, where I would listen to music and I would get all these visuals in my head and I'm like, oh, that's like an idea. I'd write it down and then I'd expand upon it. And so when I'm writing a film or I'm editing a film, or even if I'm watching a film, you watch it similarly to how you listen to a song. If a song, has like a great momentum and it has like its build up and then it, ends perfectly, that's a good song. And then there's some songs where you're like, okay, why is it a 9-minute song? Why does it have this, 3-minute guitar solo that just
Mm-hmm.
drags out and you just wish it could, crunch down. So I look at movies and editing them is kind of like how it is with music, and it has to have a tempo, it has to have a beat. And if you lose that, then the audience gets disengaged. They check their watch, they check their phone. And so it's something that obviously, I'm still learning and I'm working on, but that is how I sort of view things. And in terms of like placement of music, it's for me, it's about a vibe. If I'm watching a scene, I feel like this needs something, I find out what it needs. I do a bunch of, planning and working with my composer, Alexander Artenson, who's, I've been working with him for like 5 years, and he just kind of gets what I need. And even with
He's great.
Frenchman, he's phenomenal, and he did Valley as well. And we're doing OCD together, but with Frenchman, we had this piece of music written that just like was not working. And it wasn't because the music was bad. It's just, I feel like I had a different vision for it initially. And then, when I heard it and he created it, I was like, I don't think this works. And we ended up going a completely different route. And so I think things change all the time. I'm not usually the type of person where an idea I have at the beginning is going to be the idea that it is at the end. These films like massively, not massively, but they change quite substantially. And even the ending of Frenchman was not supposed to end the way it did. And not to spoil the ending, but the ending scene where, the whole kind of thing, which you know what it is, came because my uncle made a comment. He's like, oh, how funny would that be if like that happened? I'm like, oh my God, wait, like that is really funny. And like, that's great because I feel like before that ending, the film just kind of felt like it stopped and it didn't have like a true ending. And so I was trying to come up with something. And so like, I'm very much the type of person. I love listening to everyone's ideas. I love kind of like gauging everything. You never know where an idea is going to come from, but
Yeah.
yeah.
So I think I'm going to start asking all the directors who come on here a question structured like this, and then giving them different options to choose.
Uh-huh.
And so I'm really curious. I think I know what you will say. So if you had to sacrifice one element from a film that you're shooting, would it be a cinematic color grade? Would it be using shallow depth of field? So you would just basically have no bokeh ever. Would it be sacrificing a camera that has a high or nice dynamic range? Or would it be well composed shots?
Well, I think for me the one that stands out to me is the camera and having the high dynamic range. I don't know if
Hmm.
that's what you thought I was
That
going to
is what
pick.
I thought.
Yeah. Dude, like when it comes to making a movie, I think there's this not a weird misunderstanding, but when it comes to young filmmakers who first get into filmmaking, and I've suffered from this too, I feel like the more expensive the camera, the better my movie is going to look. And it's absolutely not the case. We have shot Frenchman and Valley on the same camera that my DP Jeremy has owned for, the past few years. And it looks beautiful. Like objectively, the image is a great image. And I've had people come up to me and they go, "Was that shot on an Arri or a Red?" And I'm like, "No, it's not even near that price. It's not even a Sony Venice. It's a Sony A7S III, and it's a great camera. Don't get me wrong, but it's not a cinema camera." I
Hmm.
used to shoot on a Canon 80D, and there was some films that I had some really, really beautiful looking images that I could get out of that camera. It really is just all about the composition. It's the composition of the shot, it's the lighting, it's, the placement of the actors, the placement of the props, and then when you get into editing, it's something that I was never really fully aware of until Valley, but how important a color grade is. When I did the initial color grade for Valley, I was a little upset and I was like, at least I tried. I thought the movie was terrible. I thought it looked terrible. And then I met my colorist, Ben Chakowski, and he's unbelievable. And he took the movie and made it just absolutely beautiful. And he took what we were able to create and make it even better. So I don't think the camera matters at all. You can
Hmm.
make a movie without having a $20,000 camera. You can make movies on your iPhone too. I mean, the new iPhone 15, not to sound like it's a product placement, but the iPhone 15 Pro Max has a beautiful camera, a really beautiful camera. You can get depth of field. You can, mess with the frame rate. It's unbelievable what you can get today. So most definitely that would be what I pick.
I thought you would choose that one because I remember you saying Valley was shot with a Sony. I couldn't remember which Sony it was,
It's an
but
A7S III. Yeah.
A7S III. Yeah, and like I mean, those cameras are great, especially in low light. And I thought your reasoning was going to be because like if you're outdoors and the dynamic range is now giving you grief, you could use bounces or something like that to like
Yeah.
counteract that stuff. I almost chose something else because I was trying to give them like equivalent ratings so that it's like really difficult to choose which one you're going to
Right.
scrap. But I was like, I don't know, like we'll just see, we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, no, I would go with the same too. Most people can't get their hands on an Airy. Like, let's just be real. You
I
you
can't
just don't have
either.
the budget for that. So,
When
um,
when we were planning OCD and we did the GoFundMe, me and my DP were talking and we're like, we do want to step it up a little bit and we want to see if we can find a better camera. And he was like, well, what about an FX3 or an FX6 or a Sony Venice or whatnot? It's still these cameras, even though it's not even like a tenth of the price of an Arri, they're still around $1,000, $2,000 a week to rent. And that's just not feasible for an indie filmmaker. And I think you have a lot of people who are like, oh yeah, like, I got an Arri kit or I got a Red kit, and that's great. But it is really how you use the camera. I've seen DPs and their work. I don't think looks as good as my DP's work, even though they have, a substantially more expensive camera. It's really about how you use the equipment rather than, what the equipment is.
there are so many different Jenga pieces that make a movie look and feel like a movie. And it's
Mhm.
crazy because with almost all of them, if you remove one of them, it doesn't look or feel like a movie.
Yeah,
And so it's interesting because like you could remove that one and it still looks and feels like one. So
totally.
that's really cool. And that's part of what you do is like you have to get creative with what you've got.
Totally. And even look at the creator. I think it was
Hmm.
Gareth Edwards or I think that's the director's name. They shot that on essentially the equivalent to our camera. It's slightly
Hmm.
upgraded from the A7S III, but I think they shot it on like an FX6 or something. And even Tangerine, I don't know if you remember that movie.
This sounds super familiar, but it's
I I can't remember the director, but he did the Florida Project with Willem Dafoe, and Tangerine was the film he did prior. He shot the film on an iPhone, and it was nominated or won an Oscar. It
wow.
really the camera, you can still get a cinematic image as long as it's lit well, the actors are there, you have decent enough sound, and
Hmm.
you you don't necessarily need a really high quality camera.
So I want to talk to you about the other film that you have, the short film that just came out recently, Flashback. So that's for the 48-hour film festival, correct?
Yeah, so it was for the AGBO 48-hour film festival, which is the Russo brothers. They hold
Mm.
an annual festival, and they give you a prompt, and you kind of come up with an idea based on their prompt, and then you submit a film, and kind of that's how you got to make it in 48 hours.
Yeah, so they give you the prompt 48 hours before the deadline. So you
Yeah,
can't plan.
no. So you could maybe get lucky if you like made a movie already that fills the prompt, but
Right. Not quite as fun. Feels like it's not in the
no,
same spirit.
no.
First thing I got to say is the idea that you were able to come up with that quick. I don't know if that was something that you had been sitting on, like this idea of like, the technology that can like, show where someone
Yeah,
was. Like, I thought that was super cool. The time travel stuff always hurts my brain. And I know people,
yeah.
get super upset about time travel stuff because like, that's not how it works. It's like, well, I don't know if anyone knows how that would work.
Right,
you
right,
know?
right. Yeah.
But I thought that was super cool that within 3 minutes, you're able to tell this short story with a completely new world where just all this tech is different.
I appreciate it. The prompt, it was not something we had sat on. I've never made a sci-fi movie, nor have I really had the desire to go a full sci-fi route. It's not necessarily stuff that I typically enjoy creating. Not to say that I dislike sci-fi movies, but for me and what I create, it's not, typically the path. And I believe the prompt for this year's festival was something along the lines of make us rethink our perception of time, whether that's timeline, time travel, time loop. It was something along those lines, and so I kind of sat down with Ryan, and I had this idea, kind of just came out of nowhere because I just had purchased this Sony Cybershot, that old like camera that we use in the movie, and I was like, oh my god, dude, what if like he takes a picture and you could see someone in the past using this tool. And Ryan was like, "That's fucking stupid, man." And I was like, "No, no, no, wait," because I didn't have the full idea out there,
Mm-hmm.
and it took me a little bit. But once I kind of really found a way to explain it to him, he's like, "Okay, that is really cool." And we sat down, and over the course of, I think, 2 hours, we wrote the film. We ended up, kind of figuring out where it was going to go. I already knew how it was going to end by the time I was kind of explaining it, and so we just had to fill in the middle section, and then after like 30 minutes after we finished writing it, we were shooting the movie. And so the second scene where he's coming into the house and it looks very like Blade Runner-y and he's in that empty house, that scene we filmed like 30 minutes after we wrote the script. And so we went in, we shot that, and we're like, okay guys, like let's go to bed and let's wake up and shoot the next scene, which was the first scene of the film. And we did it the next day. We finished, I think, around like 1 p.m. We finished the whole kind of project. I started editing it like crazy, and got it done around like 10 o'clock that night. So for us, we did it, and I think about less than 35 hours or something is what we made the film in. So we wrote it, shot it, edited, and did everything under 35 hours. But the final product you're seeing does have a better color grade than what I initially had. So I had my colorist Ben Chakowski do a color grade, and I had Alexander make some music that was a little more structured to the film. But it's still very similar to the one that we ended up finishing for the festival.
Before I forget to ask this, did you just have another friend who just happened to move and you could use this empty apartment?
You know what's so funny? I did, and my friend Roz, who Valley and Frenchman, he moved to a new place, and he still had his old apartment, and they had
Mhm.
literally just moved out like that morning, and he had the apartment for a couple more days, and I was like, dude, we're doing this 48-hour film festival. I'm shooting with Ryan. Can we just come to your place? And he's like, all right, yeah, here's the keys. He gave me the keys. And it was funny because he told me, he's like, Luca, he's like, please, like, I still have my PlayStation and my TV like hooked up in the other room. He's like, just don't forget to lock my door. And I was like, Roz, I've known you for like 15 years, dude. Like, I'm not going to forget to lock your door. We shoot the whole movie. We're exhausted. It's like 4 a.m. We definitely have to go home because we were shooting again the next morning at 10 a.m. And so I was like, okay, guys, let's wrap up. Good shit. We all leave. And as I'm driving home, I get home, I shower, I lay in bed. I'm about to go to bed. It's 5 o'clock in the morning, and my eyes open up. I go, oh my God, I forgot to lock his house. And so I sped over to his empty apartment at 5 o'clock in the morning. Here's a second irrational fear. I'm terrified of the dark, or empty, dark apartments. It's not fun. And so when I get to his house, the door was open like completely. in the middle of the night. And it freaked me out because I was like,
Oh
oh my God,
shit.
dude, did I leave it this way or is someone in here? And, I love Roz, but I'm not going to like die for your apartment. So I just closed the door, locked it, and then like ran. But thankfully nothing was taken and it was, and it was all okay. But yeah, no, really coincidentally, another friend moved out.
Yeah, Dirty Mike and the boys are inside Roz's apartment.
I just open it. There's like a bonfire.
Yeah. So when you're taking on a challenge like this, it's 48 hours. Does a part of you get worried that you're going to compromise on what you're capable of because of it? Like, do you worry about if you made a bad film, then now that's like on your record, and you're like, fuck, like I wish I just didn't even do it at all, or are you like, I just want to do the challenge?
It's an interesting thought because it was something that I had when we were after we finished the movie. For me, I didn't really plan on necessarily releasing the film. It was kind of something that I was talking to Ryan and Jeremy, and I was like, this would be a really fun challenge. And, although we didn't win anything, it still put us out of our comfort zone so much that now I have a sci-fi movie and everyone is like, I can't even believe you made this in 48 hours. It's a really cool concept. And I wouldn't have done that without the challenge or the competition. So for me, I wasn't too concerned about how the final product turned out. I was just like, this will be a really fun thing for us to shoot something and do something in the meantime, because we hadn't worked on a film since Frenchman, which was, the end of last year. And as a creative, you start to get really itchy and you just want to get back on set and you just want to do something. And so I think this was a perfect opportunity to do that. And it was also a nice kind of like tune up before we started shooting OCD. So we did it like a few weeks before we started our first day. But I wasn't too concerned about how it turned out until I finished it. I just wanted to make sure, because I was like, this is pretty cool. I want to release it. I just want to make sure it made sense. But now that everyone has, seen it and people are letting me know, they're like, oh, this totally makes sense. I was like, okay, cool. Because I thought it was a little confusing when I was like kind of pitching it, and I just wanted to make sure I wasn't just understanding it because it was my idea.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I think with any film that I make, I try not to get into that mindset of like, oh my God, what if it's bad? And instead I'm like, even if it's not fully exactly what I wanted, I can still take something away. I can still learn something and then apply it to the next film.
So with OCD, you're shooting that currently, or are you done shooting it?
We're shooting it currently. So
Okay.
we've only shot, I think, 2 days so far, 2 days out of our 6. OCD follows a neurotic delivery driver named Owen, who is struggling from severe OCD. And his TikToker girlfriend is at home and she's preparing an exposure therapy dinner date to kind of expose him to the very things that trigger his OCD. And when she helps him resist his compulsion, it basically triggers the apocalypse. And
That's right.
it's a crazy movie.
Do you have OCD? Is that why you wrote it like it would be the end of the world? Because I feel like I could kind of relate to that.
Yes, for me, I have dealt with OCD, and it's kind of been something that when I was younger, I didn't really understand why, if something wasn't this way, I would, freak out and think my mom or my dad was going to die if I didn't do this. And when you learn that that's not necessarily like the normal way of thinking or neurotypical way, I think is how you say it, then you kind of do your own research, you talk to people, and you realize that it's something that is like a legit thing. And my best friend Roz, who's the lead actor in OCD, he also suffers from OCD, and him and I, we've talked about it before, and understanding that it's something that I don't think is fully talked about in a deep sense, because people think OCD is just about washing your hands a bunch or like fixing things. And it's not really about that. It's more about the intent of why you do those things. It's not just because you like things neat and clean. And so when I met Connor, who I am writing the film with, we had met on a Zoom call, and then it was about a week later, he invited me out for a beer, and you get 4 or 5 beers deep with someone, you start talking about personal shit. And he expressed to me how he had been struggling with OCD for his whole life, and he had a concept for a movie of what if all those crazy intrusive thoughts that you thought would happen actually happened. And it kind of clicked immediately in my head, and I was like, oh my God, this is fucking awesome. And for us as like filmmakers, obviously this is like a very like it's a real issue. It's not, just some made up thing. And it is something that a lot of people deal with. But for us, we like to put a humorous lens on it. And so the movie is funny, but there also is a very real understanding where I've given the script to people and they go, oh, I didn't know OCD was like that. People will read it and they go, I didn't know it was like you felt like shit was going to end, or you felt like, horrible things were going to happen. And it is. And so I think for us, we can still make a movie and tell it in the way that we enjoy telling movies, where it's entertaining and it's funny, while also, pushing a very serious topic that a lot of people struggle with, in their day-to-day lives.
It will be interesting to, see what people say, the reviews, and check out the comment sections, because there will probably be a ton of mental health dialogue going on in there.
Yeah.
I know it was like that after I watched Beau is Afraid, like, and you look at, everyone's got their own theory of what kind of thing from the mental illness is affecting him in which way. So I have a feeling yours will be as thought-provoking in discussion, inciting.
Totally. And I appreciate it. And Beau's Afraid, also, just to mention, that is a really good example, because when Connor and I were working on the film, it was actually something that we brought up, because in the beginning of Beau's Afraid, in where he runs out to the market and all those people are out there and they all have guns and they start chasing him and he runs to the door and he closes it. That's like how OCD feels sometimes. And I was surprised that the movie didn't go down that route of it being like a hallucination, or it was just like in his head, and the fact that it was all real was kind of crazy. But it is very similar in tone of that feeling that things are like this serious and this real for people who deal with it. It's my favorite thing that I've worked on so far, and I'm so excited to get it done and release it to everyone, and just get it out there, because I do think it is obviously my best work so far. But it's just like, dude, the people that we have attached to it, we've actually had a budget, which is so different from Valley and Frenchman had no budgets. And even people are like, well, how did you get like $20,000 for Valley? I'm like, I didn't have $20,000 for Valley. Valley was me like finding money and being like, okay, hey man, like, can you please do this for me? Like, do me a favor. Yeah. This, we didn't have to do that. And we were able to get some really exciting actors attached. We have Stephen Ogg, who is playing we call him the agent, and he's amazing and an incredible actor, and I'm sure you've seen him around. He's been in like Westworld, Walking Dead, he was in GTA, but
he's Trevor Phillips, right?
Yeah, Steven he's a phenomenal actor, and he's, even outside of Grand Theft Auto, he's done like, I don't know if you've seen Solus. He incredible performance in Solus, and it was something when I met him, I was like, for me, when I was looking at actors who we can like reach out to, or actors when Connor and I were working on the script, he immediately came to mind because of his performance in Solus. And he's such a talented and very kind man. So I love Steven, and I'm excited to work with him. We're working with him early December, and we got Ariel Martin, who's baby Ariel. You've probably seen her on like social media. She's big on there, and she's just a very, very sweet, kind human being, and a great actor alongside that. I think that's like kind of a main thing I look for working with people, is just that they're nice people first.
Yeah.
And then second, they're also, insanely talented. So it's really exciting, man. It's a really exciting movie. Connor, the writer, and I are working on a feature version of it, and we're just trying, our best to make this short film as like a perfect kind of proof of concept pitch. So that way, when we have the feature written, you have this short that you can have something tangible. You can watch it. You understand who these characters are and who these people are. But yeah, really my goal is, this is my last short film. And that's how I'm kind of approaching it, is I'm going to put my absolute all into this project, as I've done with every other project. But, this is most definitely my most planned film, my biggest budget film. The most shoot days. We have some great lenses, which actually have like helped us step up our production quite a bit from Sue,
which I think is anamorphic ones.
Those are the anamorphics, and it was really funny because my DP was like, dude, I would love to have these Sue anamorphics, because an anamorphic look would just make this film step up just that a little bit more. I was like, okay, well, let me see if I can rent them and, put that in the
Hmm.
budget. And it was like, a couple $1,000s for how much we needed to shoot. And I ended up getting an email from Sue Ray as I was looking at rental prices. And they were like, hey, Luca, we saw your TikTok and we'd love to send you some free stuff. And I was like, oh my God, would you guys send me a lens kit? And they're like, absolutely. And they sent us 4 lenses for free. And we had to make a video, and they're beautiful lenses. They're great for independent filmmakers. And they also make, higher level lenses for like cinema cameras and whatnot. But these are, they definitely do the job.
That's cool, because I was gonna ask you if like that's something that you do before starting a film, is like reaching out to companies to see if anyone would like to sponsor it, or because I knew about your lens partnership, I was wondering if maybe they came to you first.
Ever since I started the TikTok earlier this year, it's been, interesting because now I have, had people reach out to me and be like, hey, can you promote this and do this?
Hmm.
And even though I don't consider myself at all an influencer or having like a huge social media following, because I don't, but it is interesting having that kind of at your disposal, and it does change things quite a bit, because for us there's been quite a few things. Even with this film, I had my girlfriend Bridget. She's a really talented producer, and she's sort of made all these amazing PDFs and reached out to multiple companies and gotten us sponsorships for the film. And she ended up making the PDF for Sue Ray that convinced them to give us the lenses. Even though they reached out to me, they initially were only like, hey, Luca, can you review this $30 tripod? And I was
Yeah.
like, hey, guys, can you send me $2,000 of lenses? And so I think stuff like that definitely helps. Is like, if you have somewhat of a following, you're working with some cool people, and you also have like a really good pitch. And so we've been reaching out to a bunch of companies, and thankfully we've secured a few, and we're working with a couple exciting you know uh companies here and there, and it's very cool. It's very different. I've never done this before for any other film. For any other film, I had, nobody. There wasn't really like anyone who was that interested except for, my mom.
Right. Well, that's super cool. Yeah, it's crazy what social media, like what doors can be opened through social media. It's just nuts.
No, it's amazing.
So I guess we can expect OCD in like maybe quarter two or quarter three next year, if or maybe it would be like later because you still haven't even edited.
It would be something that, as horrible as this sounds and as long away as this is, it would be something like 2025.
God damn.
Because the thing is like, for us, the nice thing is we can still, work with Frenchmen. We can't publicly release it and, promote it on TikTok and whatnot, but we can still, if I, and I've had some meetings this year with companies and whatnot, and I've still been able to send it to them, and they can look at it and go, okay, like, this is amazing. This is exactly what, we like or we're looking for or whatnot. And so it's not like we can't do anything with the movie when we finish it. It's just,
Right.
it does suck, because for us, it's like, you make a movie for, people and yourself, and now that we have people who are actually watching our stuff and are waiting, every time I post something on Instagram, everyone's like, where's Frenchman? And I hate being like, 7 more months. It's like, it
Yeah.
sucks, but you kind of have to play the game if you want to do the film festival stuff. And it does definitely help. You go to festivals, you meet agents, managers, and even other actors and writers, and it's film festivals are an absolutely amazing thing to do. So if you want to be involved in that, you cannot release your movie for almost a year, which is, the downside.
I'm excited for when everyone else gets to watch Frenchman, then they know what we're talking about with this ocean scene and losing packing
Yeah.
peanuts. And then I'll be excited when I'm fucking like 30, I guess, is when it's going to be to see OCD. That's
OCD
so
will come out in
sad.
7 years. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming back on here. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. And seriously, I'm glad that this will be your last short film, because I'm ready to see a full length feature.
Thank you, man. Me too. Me too. I feel like I've made enough at this point where OCD is like, after that, I need to do a feature, and I believe I have enough behind my belt after OCD to really tackle that and get, bigger people interested in believing in me as well.
Heck yeah, man. Well, if you want to let anyone know who doesn't already follow you, where they can follow you.
You can follow me on Instagram, TikTok at Luca Pizzoleo, yeah, Lucapizzoleo. But yeah, man, and thank you again for having me on. This is one of my favorite podcasts I've done. It is the favorite podcast that I've done. I
Heck
I
yeah.
love I love talking to you, and it's always a good time. So thank you, man.
Yeah, thank you.